Tov, Chag Sameach, everybody. We're celebrating now Tu B'Shvat, which Tu B'Shvat is a very different type of holiday because it doesn't really have much that we do in Tu B'Shvat. Besides that we're going to eat some fruit soon, there's nothing much that we do. But nevertheless, it's a very powerful day. Usually the days that are the most powerful are the most under the radar. And we're just going to learn a little bit about Tu B'Shvat so we can know what to try to achieve today or what to apply today, which is always important to know what I can achieve on a certain day. I mean, every day has a certain energy, and we want to know what to tap into. So it says in the Mishnah that there are 4 Rashei Shaneh, 4 heads of the year. The first of Nisan, the first of Elul, the first of Tishrei, and the first of Shvat. So the first of Nisan, which is the first month, is the Rosh Hashanah to the kings, LaMelachim v'LaRegelim, and to the festivals. The first of Elul is the Rosh Hashanah for what's called Maaser Behema, for Maaser of an animal. The first of Tishrei is for Rosh Hashanah Lashanim, to the years, Lashmitim, to the Shmitot, Layovlot, to the Jubilee, Jubilee year, and also for planting, and also for vegetables, and so forth. That's when we start calculating the Maaser. And then the first of Shvat is the Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year of the trees. Specifically,
the first of Shvat or is the 15th of Shvat?
The Mishnah says the first of Shvat, and Bet Hillel says it's the 15th of Shvat. And of course we go by Bet Hillel, and we celebrate it on the 15th of Shvat. But the Mishnah says the first of Shvat. You're right, that's the opinion of Bet Shammai. And Bet Hillel disagree as usual, and says it's on the 15th of Shvat. So this is the time that we celebrate this Rosh Hashanah La'ilanot, which we mentioned yesterday, that if you give Maaser from your own fruit, then Rosh Hashanah, Aleph Tishrei, is when we calculate all the Maasrot, as for the cutoff time for the year. But Tu B'Shvat, the 15th day of Shvat, that's when we calculate, it's the cutoff date for the Maasrot of the Perot Adar, Pri Etz Adar, of the citrus. So we just talked about it yesterday a little bit. But it's important to know, because many people, especially here in Israel, they give their own Maaser from their own fruit. And it's important to know the cutoff date, because if you took fruit off your tree yesterday, you didn't give Maaser yet, then today you have to give twice Maaser, one for the year before and one for this year. So specifically for fruit, citrus fruit, then the cutoff, the year, the calculation for the Masrot is Tu B'Shvat. But nevertheless, we know Tu B'Shvat as being the holiday for the trees, which brings a big question. Why do we have holidays for the trees and not for animals? I mean, why are the animals left out? We know the world is divided into 4 groups. Human, Medaber, animal, and vegetation, Someach, and inanimate. And you have a question?
Well, I thought the animals were the same thing as people, Rosh Hashanah.
No. But if you don't mind, we'll do all the questions at the end. That way it keeps the flow of the class. But no, I'm talking about why we don't have a Rosh Hashanah, why don't have a celebration. So we know there are 4 levels in creation: inanimate, vegetation, animal, and humans. So it brings the first question: why the animals don't have Rosh Hashanah too? Why just what's so special about specifically the vegetation? And of course, another question: why Tu B'Shvat? Why not any other day? What's specific on the 15th day of Shvat? Why not the first day of Shvat or the 15th day of Tevet? And we know that we don't really do much this holiday. There's nothing much to do besides that we don't say Tachanun. The only thing that we do is we eat. And we eat from the fruit. After the class, we're going to have a seder of different fruit that we eat, and we say different psukim from the Torah. So why specifically eating? I mean, okay, one of the things that we do is we actually also plant today. It's good to plant something today, even if it's not a tree for food, even if it's just even a flower. It's good to go to the mashtela over there. How do you call it? A greenhouse. Buy something and plant it in the ground.
Seeds would qualify in that?
Yeah, everything. Anything that you plant today has a very special power. We'll explain that in a second. You already did the planting?
I have a whole bunch of seeds I'm looking for.
So if you can plant something that is already grown, that's a little bit better. But there's a how do you call it? A mashtela around here. How do you call it? A greenhouse? Not a greenhouse. A greenhouse? Flower shop. They have a lot of flowers and stuff. You just buy something for 5 shekels, plant it in the ground, make the city look nicer. So, but mainly what we do is we eat. So also there's a question, what's with the eating? Why specifically with eating? I mean, we're a nation that celebrates by eating. Every holiday we just eat. Somebody, the joke, somebody tried to kill us, Hashem save us, let's eat. So we're constantly eating in this in our religion. And of course, another question that is all connected to each other. We have a verse in the Torah that it says, "Ki Adam hu etz hasadeh," that the man is the tree of the field. And what does that mean? Why the man specifically is the tree of the field? So first of all, why don't we have a Rosh Hashanah to the animals? Then you're right when you say that we are like animals. Our body is equal to an animal. And there's a verse in the Torah that says, "Mutar ha'adam min ha'behema ayin." That's where our body is equal to an animal. If you take now the neshama out, the godly soul, we will be like an animal that wants to eat, sleep, fight, procreate, mate, and just wander around, just do nothing. And unfortunately, half of the population of the world are like that. Just taking air in the world, not doing really much. But the difference between the body of an animal and the body of a human being, that's what the Torah says, "Mutar ha'adam min ha'behema ayin," that the la'adam comes from ayin doesn't mean no. There isn't any, like ain. Ayin is a spiritual place. It says the Kadosh Baruch Hu created yesh me'ayin, something from nothing. But ayin is not a nothing. Ayin is just is a very high spiritual world. That's why we say chokhmah me'ayin timatzeh. So one can interpret it by saying the wisdom, where is it going to be found from? But it's not correct translation. Me'ayin timatzeh means in the level that is called ayin, and that's spelled aleph yud nun. That's where chokhmah comes from. So the difference between the animal body and the physical body, and the human body, is that we have a neshama, we have a soul. And in the soul, and in the body that has a soul, there's a big difference. Now, and that's why there isn't a Rosh Hashanah for the animals, because the reason, the way Hashem created the world in 4 levels, is that each level has to elevate the next level. So when a human being eats an animal that ate grass that was grown in sand, in earth, so the human elevates all 3 levels of the inanimate and the vegetation and the animal. When the animal eats grass, then it's only able to elevate 2 levels: the inanimate, the ground, the earth, and the grass. So we have the ability to elevate all 3 levels. Now, in essence, it seems like we are the highest level, the human beings. But really, it's the inanimate that is coming from the highest level. Because the way it works, the Arizal explains, he has a rule in his teaching, mala mala nofel mata mata. What comes from a highest place falls into this world to the lowest place. And we always give the same example. If you take now a wall like this, a wall of bricks, and if you push the wall down, then the bricks that are on the bottom of the wall will not go far away, and the bricks that are on the top will fall the furthest away if you kill the whole wall down. Same thing here. Whatever fell down into this world that looks like it's motionless, it's actually coming from a much higher spiritual place. So the source, the roots of inanimates is coming from a much higher place than our souls. That's why they don't even move, because we were in a much lower place, so we don't see any godly revelation. But inanimate, why is it not moving? Because it constantly sees Hashem. That's why it's not moving. So it's frozen, it's completely frozen, like a rock or sand or whatever it is, because it constantly sees a godly revelation, and that's where it's motionless. We don't see Hashem, so we're able to move and to talk and to feel like we're some type of an existence. So part of our a big part of our tikkun, our rectification in this world, is to elevate the levels of creations that are beneath us. So the biggest part of our tikkun is specifically with eating. We talked about it a few weeks ago in the class of the Rosh Chodesh Shvat, that I mentioned that in the month of Shvat, the sense is the sense of eating. And I mentioned that specifically eating, is one of the biggest tikkunim that we have to do. From all what we need to sift in this world, the majority of it is in food. And specifically in the level of tzomeach, in the level of vegetation, not animals. So originally Adam and Chava were vegetarians, and very soon when Mashiach is going to come, we're going to go back to become vegetarians. We're not going to be eating meat. That's why the only time that we're commanded to really enjoy and to eat meat is on Shabbat and on Yom Tov. Why? Because on Shabbat and Yom Tov we have an extra soul. So the extra soul is able to process heavier food like meat. There's no mitzvah to eat meat during the week. On Shabbat, part of the simcha, part of the joy of Shabbat is with wine and with meat. Same on Yom Tov. Because specifically the tikkun is of food is with the level of tzomeach, of vegetation. Now, since we mentioned that on Shabbat we get an extra soul, it's not that you get a roommate. It's not that they find a soul somewhere and say, hey, you want to spend Shabbat with him? That's not how it works, because a lot of people think that extra soul that you get is that they have you have a website, Shabbat.com, they match you up with the people who need to eat. There's no website, Neshama.com. They match you on Neshama. Rather the Neshama that we have gets such an elevation, such an aliyah, that it now has a power of 2 Neshamot. And it has much extra powers. That's what it means. It means that you get an extra soul, then you have a visitor. But nevertheless, during Shabbat, because the neshama is in a much higher place, it's able to elevate and to do a tikkun through eating specifically for meat. But during the week, the tikkun that we do with food is specifically with vegetation, with tzomeach. Now, there is a Talmud that says that donkeys were not created to donkeys were created to serve the human beings, not their own creatures, not their own species. That chamorim enam nivru leshamesh et bnei minam. Donkeys were not created to serve donkeys. Donkeys were created to serve human beings. And the same idea, human beings were not created to serve animals. Even though many cultures, that's what they believe. They believe that they have to serve the animals, and their animals is for them a god. Or yeah. Then in many cultures, their animals are above them. But the teachings of the Torah specifically says no, animals were created to serve us. They weren't created to serve themselves, and definitely we're not created to serve them. The animals were created to serve us. There is an argument in the Torah why Adam HaRishon was created last. One opinion says because he's the top of all creation, therefore he had to come to a perfect world. There's a different opinion that says no, it's to make him humble, to understand that you were created last. Even a mosquito was created before you. So, but nevertheless, the man was created last because he needed to come into a ready-made world, that the whole world is created for us in order to elevate it. You're not here to use the world, not here to now to damage the world or to use its resources, rather to elevate the world to a higher place. Now, the most important part in our tikkun specifically is that we have to elevate the levels of creations beneath us, that specifically the level of vegetation is the one that we have to do the most of the tikkun. That's why I said that on Shabbat, that's when we are able and allowed to more enjoy eating meat, because that's already coming from the level of chai, of an animal. And that's when we have the ability to easily elevate it. And usually during the week, then to eat meat is not going to be doing any elevation to the meat, because we eat it with te'ava. We eat it with too much of a desire for the meat and not for the sake of elevating it. And the rule is that if you don't elevate what you eat, then what you eat pulls you down. That's how it usually works. So it's not that you eat the meat and if you weren't able to elevate it, then everything's fine. If you didn't able to elevate the meat, the animal, to a higher place, then that will pull you down to its level. So that's why it's highly recommended not to constantly eat meat during the week. Besides the problem of kosher, that's one big problem, that half of the meat that is in the market is not even kosher. But that's a different issue. And I'm talking about the health part right now, how the meats here and everywhere all over the world is injected with the antibiotics and hormones and all sorts of junk and fed with GMO. And if you really see what the process that the meat is going through, I don't think you would want to so much eat meat. How the animals are grown, how they're tortured, how they're slaughtered, and which brings a whole different way of looking of the doubt if the meat can even be kosher or not, that the animals are tortured and so forth. So, but nevertheless, during the week, the chances of elevating the animal is much, much lower, because we eat the meat because I desire the meat. It comes with a te'ava, with I don't know if you can say lust for the meat, but the te'ava for eating the meat. On Shabbat, you don't have that, because on Shabbat, anything you eat is a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to enjoy the food. So on Shabbat, go ahead and have your meat and enjoy it, and then you're able to actually elevate it. Now, more than that, the reason why we have specifically the tikkun in the level of tzomeach is because of the nature of tzomeach is vegetation, because of the nature of the vegetation. Nature of vegetation is to grow. Animals don't grow. Animals, I mean, they grow from being born to a certain age, and that's it. And they're not developing. They reach to their maturity, and then they just live for whatever amount of time they're designated to live. But the nature of vegetation is to constantly grow. Vegetation never stops growing. If you let it be, it will grow and grow and grow, and that's even their name in Hebrew. I mean, the names in Hebrew, they represent the what the thing is about. And in Hebrew, vegetation is called tzemach or tzomeach. This is the same word in Hebrew, growth. So more than that, the vegetation has another quality, is that it has the quality to renew itself. Now it's winter, it's all cold, all the trees outside, they're all naked, no leaves, and it seems like they're dead. Wait one more month, suddenly everything will start growing. Beautiful flowers everywhere, leaves. There's one of the trees outside that when we got it was full of beautiful leaves, full of flowers. Now in the winter it looks like a skinny scarecrow. There's nothing there. There's just like a skinny, it's not even a trunk. But wait one more month, you'll see suddenly beautiful tree again. So it has the nature, what is called hitchadjut, to renew itself, That animals don't have. Animals, the only animal that maybe you can say that has some type of a change in a renewity, maybe there's more, but the one that I'm familiar with is a snake, that it changes renews its skin every couple months. Every couple months.
There's certain amphibians
Yeah.
regrow limbs.
So there are all sorts of other animals, but I'm not familiar with all the animals in the world, but there are animals that they change their skin. But other than that, look at all the vegetations. Vegetations, they have the nature of renewing itself. It will go through a process of, let's say, losing its leaves or losing its flowers or not producing any fruit, and then it will renew itself. So, and animals don't have that. Now, our purpose in this world is to have this level in spirituality, is to constantly have a spiritual growth and to have a renewity, a spiritual renewity, that constantly I will, so to say, go down and then go up and go down and go up. My entire spiritual development, if you notice, there's no such a thing with a spiritual development that it goes like that. You go up and then you go down a little bit, and then you go up and then you go down a little bit. There's no other way to develop spiritually. That's why a lot of people, they get discouraged because they work on their spiritual level and they're doing very well for 3-4 months, praying in a minyan, learning Torah, eating kosher, everything is good, and then whoop, they fall for a month or two, or even sometimes maybe a day or two, or a week. They just fall. And then it makes them, chas v'shalom, get discouraged. What? I was so great. I never didn't miss a minyan for half a year, and pitom, I slipped, and for a whole week I'm not doing anything. But that's the journey of the spiritual growth, that you constantly go up and then go down, go up and go down. But every time you go down, you go one level higher. That's why you see the motion of life. Connect a human being now to a monitor, and you'll see the motion of life is going up and down, tit, 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 tit. And if chas v'shalom, the line is straight, then the person is dead. It's motionless there. So the motion of life even is the concept of going up, shooting up, and then falling down, then shooting up and falling down. So an animal doesn't have that. An animal doesn't have that nature. It's pretty much same level. But the level of vegetation has the idea of constantly growing and growing and growing, and not only that, renewing and renewing. That's why the tikkun that we have to do, the main part of the rectification, not my personal rectification necessarily, the tikkun of the entire world, specifically is done in the level of vegetation. Because the level of vegetation, that's where I'm getting my source of growth and renewity. Now, this is kind of like covering in a few words why we have a Rosh Hashanah for the trees and not for the animals. Because from the animals, I don't get much. And not only that I don't get much, I'm not supposed to elevate much that level. They did that at the time of the Beit HaMikdash with the Korbanot. And B'ezrat Hashem, very soon we're going to have a Beit HaMikdash. There'll be more Korbanot, but for a very short period. We're not going to have the sacrifices the whole time. The sacrifices will at some point stop. We're not going to have animal sacrifices. Rather, we're only going to have vegetation sacrifices, such as barley and wheat and oil and excuse me?
The water libation during Sukkot?
Yeah, but the animals we're not going to have. We're going to have in the beginning, and then that is going to stop too. Now comes, of course, the question, like I said, what specifically happens on Tu B'Shvat, on the 15th of Shvat? So we know, we spoke about it, I think about a month ago in one of the classes about the month, that our calendar is a lunar calendar and not a sun calendar. We don't go by the cycle of the sun, because the cycle of the sun is very accurate. The cycle of the moon is a little bit different. We only have 29 and a half days in a month according to the moon. But specifically, even though we have calendars in the past, we used to determine when will be the month based on the vision of the moon. Even at the time of the Beit HaMikdash, they also had calendars. They also knew how to calculate it, but they still went by the testimony of the witnesses to know when the Rosh Chodesh is. But since the cycle of the sun and the cycle of the moon are not equal, Then the problem with with the calendar of the moon is at some point we're going back all the time. That's why we have every 3 years we have a leap year, because the advantage of the cycle of the sun is that it has seasons. And in the olden days we were all farmers, so we were depending on the seasons, because winter was a certain season, then summer, then the spring, and the agriculture goes by the seasons, by the cycle of the sun. And the moon is shorter. So what happens is if we wouldn't have a leap year every couple of years, Pesach would be in the winter. And then we can't have that with Pesach in the winter. So every 3 years we add a leap year. So specifically on the 15th day of Nisan, going by the time of the year, the saraf of the trees starts growing. And the saraf is the power in the tree that starts making it grow. So during the winter, it's not effective, and the tree doesn't grow. It doesn't grow, it doesn't produce, it doesn't develop. It's just, so to say, dead. And specifically, on the 15th day of Shvat, the saraf, it's called saraf. I don't know how it's called necessarily in English. How? Sapper? But how do you call it? Sapper? Sap. Yeah. So the sap starts growing. So in Hebrew it's called saraf. That happens specifically on the 15th day of Shvat. Amazingly, I noticed that many years, constantly I always pay my attention. It says, Aviv Higia Pesach Ba. When Pesach comes, the spring comes with it. I don't know if you notice. Doesn't matter if Pesach falls on a March or Pesach falls on an April. Always in Pesach, you start to see trees blooming. Doesn't matter when. It doesn't matter when it falls. And I always pay attention to see. And Pesach comes, whoops, you start to see the trees starting to grow flowers and everything starts sprouting. So nature knows a little bit better than our calendars. And specifically on the 15th day of Shvat, the sap starts waking up, the saraf, and that starts developing the tree. The saraf is the inner life force of the vegetation. We mentioned a couple times how everything in this world has a godly spark that enlivens it, and that godly spark is operating according to the energy that is coming from the world above. It's not depending on us here. So the vegetations have this natural awakening, specifically on the 15th day of Shvat. That's why when there was an argument between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, that Bet Shammai says, no, it's the first of the month, like all the other months. Bet Hillel says, no, it's not on the first of the month, it's on the 15th. Why? Because that's when the saraf, it says in Hebrew, saraf ole ba'ilanot. The sap goes up in the trees and in the vegetation. Now we asked another question, why specifically eating? What's the concept of eating? Why don't we dance, or why don't we, burn something, or why specifically eating? Where does that come from? So we know that eating is a tikkun, is a rectification. That's why we all have a yetzer hara with eating. Everybody, whether they admit it or not, we don't have control so much on eating. Put some now food on the table that you like a lot. Everybody's going to be jumping over it. When Ephraim was here during the Shabbatot, he always used to bring jelly beans, because we were always making a joke that we have a source that the jelly bean, if you say shehakol on jelly beans on Seudah Shlishit, you find your other half. Anyways, we were making a joke out of it, but we used to bring a lot of jelly beans. And one time we made a mistake and we took the jelly beans out before I started talking. You think somebody listened to me? There's 80 people here, nobody listened. Everybody's like 3-year-old people barely have teeth, but they were, putting the jelly beans in their mouth and fighting. I want the blue one, give me the pink one, give me the yellow one. And at the end I was like, wow, jelly beans, nobody's even listening to what I'm saying. So the following week we took the jelly beans after when I talked, but everybody was still drooling, like looking at the table. I want that pink one over there. So we have a big yetzer hara with food. We wake up in the morning, right away I need to put something in my mouth. I need a cup of coffee. Try to once control your desire for food. Don't fast. Just till 12 o'clock in the afternoon. Don't touch food. just to control the desire for the food. You don't have to wake up in the morning and right away open the fridge and starts eating. It's actually not healthy. Better just to drink a big cup of water first thing in the morning, wash all the system, all the dirt, all the germs, and wait for 2-3 hours. That's going to be much more effective. So we do have a very big tikkun specifically with food. That's why we have a very big yetzer hara with food. But specifically the tikkun is that everything in the world has a certain godly spark. Specifically in food, the spark that's in food is there's a common denominator between my godly spark and food. And there's a very unique connection. That's why you see that specifically a lot of the prohibitions in the Torah is with food. Not to mix meat and dairy, and all the brachot that we have to say. And look how much rules are when it comes to food that goes in the ground. Shmita and Maser and Orla and Tevel and so many things specifically with food. There's a lot of prohibition when it comes to food. With animals there's not much. Okay, tzar balei chaim, you can't torture an animal. And what else? We don't have much prohibitions with animals. But when it comes to food, there's a lot of rules, a lot of details, a lot of halachot. And besides, we see that the first sin that ever happened was with food, was with eating. It wasn't with marital relations. It wasn't with idol worship. It was specifically with eating. So there is a very powerful tikkun specifically with eating. We're not going to get too much into that. Just to understand that when I eat some vegetable or fruit, it's not for the vitamins. That's the doctors will tell you, or the nutritionists will tell you, eat the fruit for the vitamins. That's very good. We eat specifically the fruit and the vegetables for the godly spark that is in it, that is called the Or HaGanuz. Everything has an Or HaGanuz in it, a hidden light. In the Sheshet Yamei Bereshit, we spoke about it so many times. Hashem used a certain light to create the world. It's called Or HaGanuz, the hidden light, that was shining for 36 hours in the beginning of the creation of the world. I mentioned that there is a machloket whether it was shining for the first full day and half of the second day, like straight 36 hours, or that it was shining only in the day for 12 hours, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And this is the the source that is more accepted, because on the fourth day, that's when Hashem created the sun and the moon. So for 3 days, 12 hours during the day, this Or HaGanuz, this godly light, was shining, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu concealed it. He took it away. But he hid it in different things. If you remember, 2 weeks ago in the Zohar class, we talked about it, that he hid it specifically in the sphere of Malchut. Remember I told you there was a gardener. The Zohar calls it a gardener. There's a certain angel that went and planted it. He hid it in the ground, specifically in the sphere of Malchut. That's where the Samech Mem, it sees it sprouting all the time. When he goes there, remember we learned about it? It should be fresh in your mind. It was 3 weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago. Nevertheless, there is a certain godly light in the fruit and the vegetable, and it's called as the Or HaGanuz, and I have to connect myself to it. That's why I will have to say a bracha. That's why I have to say an after bracha. And that's why fruit, not in Israel, but fruit has to be kosher. Can't eat fruit that was grown on the Shnat Shemitah, and can't on the sabbatical year. It has to give maaser from it, and if you don't, it's considered tevel. And if you plant a tree, you have to wait 3 years, called orla. There's a lot of rules with the fruit, and you know what? It's actually, there is a discussion in halacha, what is more powerful? What is worse? To eat pig, to eat a pork, which is not kosher, or to eat fruit that are tevel? Fruit that are tevel are fruit that they didn't give maaser from. And all agree that eating fruit that is tevel is worse than eating pork in regards to the severity of kosher. So we go real crazy on the bacon, don't touch the ham. But eating fruit that are tevel is worse in the severity of the prohibition. So the reason why we're eating is because eating is a rectification, is the tikkun, and it has to be done specifically in the form of eating. Now, the last thing that we asked is why we're called, why it says in the Torah, Ki Adam U'etz HaSadeh, why is the man considered the tree of the field, is because the tree has a quality of constantly growing. Maybe other types of vegetations don't grow. Like I said before, everything in vegetation grows. Maybe some flowers don't. You plant them in the pot, and they grow a little bit and stop. But trees always will grow. Tree will constantly grow and grow and grow. And if you leave it, it will grow for 200 years, for 300, for 500 years. I was once not too long ago. You're from Sacramento, right? I went to a trip in near San Francisco, and they took me to that forest where there's these like a 500-year tree. How is it called? Redwood? Yes, so we went to this beautiful hike. These trees, they were like wide. One of the tree has a hole, and we drove the car through the tree. Like we had a big SUV, and we went through the tree. They cut the tree. So these massive, massive trees, 500 years old, 5,000. Yeah, maybe they're there from Sheshit Yemei Bereshit, God knows. So yeah, in Yosemite, but nevertheless, a tree constantly grows. And even though it has periods that it, so to say, looks dead, or it doesn't grow, that's just because it's the part of the cycle. And a tree constantly grows. Not only that it grows, it develops. And not only that it develops, it succeeds in its growth. There's no such a thing that a tree that doesn't work out. That it grew and oops, this year the fruit didn't come out. And oops, this year the tree didn't come out leaves. It always succeeds in its growth.
No, some trees, 1 year the tree's not as sweet as the year before.
Okay, but you're right. But I'm talking about that it will always show the leaves. Take now, and I never heard of such a thing, that one winter the leaves fall and then in the spring they don't come back. And it skips a year. Of course, the quality of the produce is different. I'm talking in the fact that the cycle of the tree is to grow, leaves fall, no flowers, no fruit. The next year, grows again. This is called to succeed in its growth. So the point is that we are very similar to a tree. We learned yesterday in Sha'ar Gilgulim, the gates of reincarnation, the Ari explains that we have 613, we have 248 limbs and 365 tendons corresponding to the 613 mitzvot, but this is also corresponding to the original 613 souls. We know that we have 600,000 souls, but from Adam HaRishon, who is one soul, it broke into 613 souls. It's another place where we're getting that 613. And from that, it broke into 600,000 souls. So we resemble a tree, because a tree has a trunk, has roots, has branches, and we just literally talked about it yesterday in the class of the Gates of Reincarnation, and also in the class of the Zohar last night, that we're like a tree. Our image is in the shape of a human, not in the shape of a tree. But the idea is we also have roots, we also have a trunk, we also have branches, and we resemble a tree. Specifically, that the nature of the tree is the growth and the renewity and the success, so to say, in its mission. Then we're the same thing. And that's mainly what I need to take from this day, because this day is the day that I draw my power, like the sap of the tree. Then the saraf in me has the power to start growing. This is a very powerful day, to a turning point that I don't need to do much. I just need to meditate on the fact that today is a turning point, and I can take that as a line to start growth. Wherever I reach till today, then today I can say, okay, today is a good day to start my new growth cycle, and to take on myself all these what we call them a hachlata, a decision. Okay, today I'm going to add X amount of hours a day for my Torah learning, and I'm going to be adding A, B, and C, whatever you think you can handle, because today there's a spiritually beginning of a growth. The sap, the saraf, it goes up to the surface. That's why we specifically celebrate the day. And there's not much of a celebration, like we mentioned, but what we do is we eat. B'ezrat Hashem, in 2 minutes we'll start eating. We'll start eating some fruit, saying some blessings. Why? to feed, so to say, this saraf in me, so I can start developing and growing, to reach to my success that I have to grow and to add and more. Just look at yourself, turn back and look at the last 30, 40 years and look at the growth. And it's very hard to see your growth looking today. But look to the past. Where were you 20 years ago, or 40 years ago, or 10 years ago? Where are you now? And the point is that I constantly want to renew my energy, to grow, and Be'ezrat Hashem also to succeed. And if I focus the right way, then I will succeed. It might seem that it will go through a very hard period, going up and down and failing, and I might not be able to. But that's just the Yetzer Hara trying to show you that you're not doing so great. But the reality is that all you need to do is you put your mind to it, and sometimes it's just like, going from point A to point B, there's no shortcuts. That you have to go through the path. And the path will take you a certain amount of steps. You go from here to your home, it will be the same amount of steps it will take you to go the next day and tomorrow and the day before. Okay, maybe you'll add a few more steps if you're going a little bit fast, bigger steps or not. But you can't change the distance. It will take you the same amount of time. So my growth takes a certain amount of time. I can't jump in my growth. It's very dangerous to jump too high in my growth. That's when I fall. So sometimes I just need to know how to walk on the path and to slowly grow. And needless to say that when I put my mind to it, that's when I become successful, because my renewity and my growth is going in the right way and slowly growing. Be'ezrat Hashem, we should only continue growing. We should only have spiritual growth, physical growth, emotional growth, and we should only see growth and success in everything that we do, in our relationships, in our business, my livelihood, and mainly in my spiritual growth. Be'ezrat Hashem should have a Chag Sameach and success in everything that we do.